Hello and welcome back to our Spring Boot series. In today's video, we're diving deep into one of the core principles of Spring Boot, constructor injection. Whether you're a beginner or an experienced developer, understanding how to properly use constructor injection is key to building robust and maintainable Spring Boot applications. Before we delve into constructor injection, let's quickly recap what dependency injection is. Dependency injection is a design pattern that allows a class to receive its dependencies from an external source rather than creating them internally. This makes our code more modular, easier to test, and aligns with the solid principles. For more detail, click on I icon. Let's get started. Open the Spring Boot project that we created in the last video. For today's constructor injection demo, let's create a separate package. I'll create a new package called Constructor Injection Demo. I'll create a new interface. The menu option is New Class. But we'll make a small modification here. And in this option, make sure to select the interface option. So, we're creating a new interface, and the name of this interface is Greeting Service. For this Greeting Service interface, we'll simply define one method called getGreeting that returns a string. And now let's create a class that implements this interface. Let's proceed to create a new class. We'll name this class Greeting Service Simple. So, the Greeting Service Simple class will implement the Greeting Service interface. You see red line on Greeting Service Simple class. Hover over it. A window will pop up with an option to implement methods. Click on it and it will show all interface methods in different window. Select the All Methods and click OK. Now, let's implement the code for the getGreeting method. We'll define it to return the greeting message "Welcome to our channel." And annotate this class with the @component annotation. The @component annotation marks the class as a Spring Bean, making it available for dependency injection. Now, let's create a REST controller class. I'll create a new class and the name of this class is Construction Injection Controller. And annotate this class with the REST controller annotation. We want to create a constructor in our class for injections. Define a private field for the dependency, private greeting service. Next, create a construction injection controller. This controller will use constructor injection to get an instance of greeting service. Define a constructor public construction injection controller and add greeting service as an input variable. And assign the greeting service input variable to our class's private greeting service variable inside the constructor. If you only have one constructor, then the use of AutoWired on the constructor is not mandatory. Next, define a get mapping for the /greeting endpoint, which calls greetingService.getGreet and returns it in the response. And next, start your Spring Boot application. Our web browser will communicate with the /greeting endpoint. This will trigger a call to our construction injection controller. The controller will then invoke the getGreeting method of the greeting service, which will return a string. Finally, we'll return this string back to the browser. As seen in the logs, our Spring Boot application has started on port 8090. Let's go ahead and test this out. Open your web browser and visit this URL. Localhost 8090/greeting. And click Enter. And success! You should see the message here. A welcome to our channel. Let's retest our code after adding the @AutoWired annotation to the constructor. Add AutoWired annotation on constructor. Restart your Spring Boot application. As seen in the logs, our Spring Boot application has started on port 8090. Open same URL in web browser. It's working as expected. It returns the message "Welcome to our channel." With multiple constructors, we will discuss in the next video. For now, let's delve into when to use constructors and how they function and so on. Let's now understand how constructor injection works behind the scenes. In our project, we have three classes: greeting service impl, and constructor injection controller. When the Spring container initializes, it scans the configured classes and identifies beans that need to be created. In our case, Spring identifies greeting service impl as marked for bean creation, and Spring will create a bean for this class and store it in the container. Next, Spring also identifies that constructor injection controller is annotated with REST controller and examines the constructor's parameters to determine the required dependencies. Since constructor injection controller requires a greeting service object, Spring retrieves the necessary greeting service dependency from the container. Finally, Spring creates the constructor injection controller bean using the constructor, passing the greeting service dependency as an argument. Regarding the bean lifecycle, we will discuss it in a separate video. Why use constructor injection? Immutability. By using constructor injection, you can make your dependencies final, which means they can't be altered after the object is created. This promotes immutability, leading to safer, more reliable code. Guaranteed dependencies. Constructor injection ensures that an object is always created with all its dependencies, making it impossible to instantiate an object in an inconsistent state. Ease of testing. With dependencies passed through the constructor, it's easier to write tests since you can pass mock implementations of dependencies when testing. Clearer dependencies. Constructor injection makes it evident what dependencies a class requires, improving code readability and maintainability. Decoupling of code. Constructor injection helps in decoupling classes from their dependencies. This decoupling makes the code more modular, easier to refactor, and reduces the risk of changes in one part of the codebase adversely affecting unrelated parts. Ease of configuration. With frameworks that support DI, such as Spring and Java, dependencies can be configured externally, leading to more flexible and dynamic applications. The application can be reconfigured without changing the code, simply by altering the configuration that specifies which implementations to inject. Consistent object state. By using constructor injection, an object is fully initialized with all its dependencies when it's created. This ensures the object is always in a consistent state, ready for use right after its creation. Promotes good design principles. Constructor injection encourages adhering to the solid principles of object-oriented design, particularly the single responsibility principle and dependency inversion principle. It encourages designing classes that have a single responsibility and depend on abstractions rather than concrete implementations. When using constructor injection, keep these best practices in mind. Prefer constructor injection for mandatory dependencies to ensure your class always has what it needs. Be mindful of the number of dependencies your class has. Too many can indicate a need for refactoring. Lastly, always aim for clear, maintainable code over convenience. If you found this tutorial helpful, please like, share, and subscribe for more Spring Boot insights. Have questions or topics you'd like us to cover? Drop them in the comments below. See you in the next video.